Hi everybody, this is Neil at Veritas Vino. Today I thought I'd talk about wine color, color in wine, how it's the pigments that are involved, what it indicates, just talking about color, its significance, things like that. When you do a formal tasting, sommelier does a formal tasting of a wine. The first thing that they look at is the appearance of the wine, and that comes before the smell of the wine or the taste of the wine. They always look at the color and the viscosity and everything like that. So the first thing that they look at is the depth or the opacity of the wine. And that ranges from watery to pale to medium to deep to dark to opaque. So when looking at a wine, you tip it at a 45-degree angle, and you look at the variation from the center of the wine all the way to the very edge. And so right between the edge and sort of in a little bit is where you're going to be able to get the best indication of the opacity of the wine, whether or not you can see through it. The second thing that you look at is the hue of the wine. So in a red wine, you're looking at everything from sort of a dark purple all the way up to maybe a brick red. And that varies from a little bit of a blue tinge at the edge, maybe, and that indicates a younger red wine. And then if it's got towards the very edge, towards the meniscus, if there's sort of an orange tinge or almost even a yellow tinge, that indicates normally a very old wine. And that happens because more yellow is introduced to wines, both in whites and in reds. More yellow is introduced into the color of the hue of the wine, and then also the blue disappears and the green disappears from red and white respectively. The next thing that you're looking for is clarity, and so clarity in wine is whether or not it has a sort of a cloudy component to it, whether or not it looks like there's a certain amount of sediment in it. And there are certain things that they can do, which is called fining in winemaking, which reduces the cloudiness of the wine. And then the next thing that you're looking for is the legs in a wine, and that happens from tilting the wine like this, and then you look at the very edge of it, and there's little streaks that run down here, and there's a couple of things that cause that. Sugar content is one. Higher sugar content causes that. A higher alcohol content can also cause that, and then also a higher suspended amount of particulates in the wine, in the solution. That being said, the main components that create the color in the wine, at least in red wines, are anthocyanin and tannin, which are both polyphenols. Now, the anthocyanin is one that's a little more. It's affected by pH actually in the wine. The color is dependent on the pH oftentimes. And so another interesting thing that happens between the anthocyanin and tannin in older wines is that the two of those can sort of create copigments, where the tannin and the anthocyanin actually will join and create a longer molecule, a larger molecule. Specifically, I don't know if that's what adds the yellow to it, but I know that's definitely related, and so there's a yellowing that occurs in older wines, both white and in reds. So another thing that can happen with secondary pigments is pyruvic acid can affect can sort of join with anthocyanin and affect secondary pigments. Another thing that happens is actually acetaldehyde, which is sort of a negative consequence of introducing oxygen into wines. in low amounts can actually improve the color, which is another sort of interesting thing that happens. And through trial and error, I'm sure is the reason why oak barrels, when they open up the plug on the wine barrels, there is a little bit of oxygen in there. There's a little bit of air, and they don't eliminate all of the air that's in there. And that's because a little bit of oxygen actually helps the coloring of the wine, and it also has other beneficial effects in the winemaking. That being said, so the blues and greens in occur more in younger wines, red and whites respectively, and the yellows and the oranges, and even a little bit of browns you can sort of get in older white wines, and that can happen from the oxidation or it's that co-pigmentation that occurs. That being said, I have this wine here. It's a Pinot Noir, actually, from Negev, Israel. It's an inexpensive bottle of wine that I found at Binny's. Under $10. Looked really interesting, given that I've never had a Pinot Noir from Israel itself, nor from Negev. And so I thought I'd try it. So in terms of the color of the wine, there is a lot of purple in the wine. It is a little bit, there is quite a bit of opacity, given that it's a Pinot Noir, and so it was probably left on the skins a lot longer than many Pinot Noirs, both Burgundies or even a lot of California Pinots or even New Zealand or Columbia Valley, Washington, things like that. So there's a certain amount of purple in it, which indicates the young wine, which checks out. It's 2013. I'm sure it's meant to be drunk young, and so I'll taste it. I'll give you a little bit of a tasting note on this wine. It's called Barkan Pinot Noir from Negev, Israel, 2013. The smell on it has a certain amount of oak to it. There's a little bit of a mustiness. I call it that. I know to a lot of people it's a negative term. I get that from an oak. It sort of indicates an older world wine. A lot of times you get that in less expensive, Bordeaux, French wines, or Chiantis out of Italy. And it has a little bit of that, somewhat subtle, but I get it from sort of an oaky character. It's sort of light-bodied, light-flavored. I'm getting a certain amount of acidity to it, which is a good indication. I like Pinot Noirs with a little bit more acidity. Oftentimes I find that indicates a colder climate, and so I'm not sure exactly what that's about, given that it's Israel. So what causes that? And I'll do some more research on that. There's a sort of looseness with the wine. It's sort of wide on the palate. There's a lot of focus to the wine. It's good. It's sort of a loose flying wine. There's components are like dark cherry. Sort of a dark young cherry. There's maybe even a little bit of there's a certain amount of minerality to the wine as well. I'm getting a lot of the sort of it's not flinty necessarily, but it's sort of a wet stone. There's quite a good minerality in there. Anyway, it's a decent wine for under $10. And you might check it out. So if you have any questions about color, email me at neil@inveritasvino.com. And that when I say that, there's actually a dash between each of those words, .com, and then also Neil _ or in underscore Veritas underscore Vino on Twitter.